What's up, guys? It's Marcus with Metaphos, and I'm here today with Hydro Pump and Pudding, two 2012 extraordinaires, and we are bringing you guys a September 2012 tier list. Pudding, I'll let you go first. Anything you want to say before we get into this?
I'm just really excited to hopefully get more people into the format. This is the format that really got me into Yu-Gi-Oh! And is still my favorite format of all time. So if we can build the player base, that would be amazing.
Heck yeah. And Hydro Pump?
Yeah, this was one of my favorite formats of the past, and it's kind of cool that there's some duelists like you that are also interested in it and want to spread the word for it.
Heck yeah. Yeah, no, I love this format. I actually played it a lot over COVID. It was really popular in my local area when I was living in Cincinnati. And yeah, it's just so diverse, and I never got bored of it. But yeah, for the people watching the video, I know a lot of people don't know a whole lot about the September 2012 format. So we want to do this video not only to show you like a tier list of what we think the best decks are, but also just kind of let you guys see how diverse it actually is when you got to see all the decks in one tier list and how close they actually are. But first, let's get into it. Our first deck is Agents. When I see pure Agents, I'm thinking like the Call the Haunted Card Trooper builds typically. I know that a couple different people topped. I think Alistair Evolution topped with this deck at YCS's. What are you guys thinking for this deck?
So there's two main versions of this deck. There's the like Simon He version, obviously a very controversial player now, that played like no traps. It played a Treacherous.
Yeah, it was more.
And I think that version is slightly worse. That got top 8 at one of the YCSs. And then there's Trooper Agents, which abuses Card Trooper, Thunder King, and Christia with 3 Call the Haunted. I'm leaning towards 1.5 to 2. It's a strong engine, but I don't think it's like as strong as some of the best engines in the format.
Hydro Pump, what are you thinking?
I think 1.5 is probably fair.
Yeah.
It has like this big beefy boss monsters that are hard to deal with for some decks. So
for sure. Yeah, that's definitely where I think I'd put it. Based on its representation in Top Cuts 2 and the format following 2012, we saw a lot more Agents than the initial September 2012 format, like even when Mermails and stuff came out. So I think people discovered more about this deck, and yeah, I think it's really good. Just a lot of good boss monsters, consistent amount of starters in the deck and normal summons, so I agree with that one. And yeah, we will be going over the Chaos Fairy build a little bit later in this list as well, so we'll see where we put that one. Next, I got Bubble Beat. This is a little bit different than your normal hero deck because Mass changes out. So they played Bubble Man and Mass Hero Acid. Is it a one-sided or is it just a Heavy Storm? Or is it a one-sided?
It's so one-sided.
Yeah, one-sided Heavy Storm, just Harpy's Feather Duster. What do you guys think of this deck? I know it didn't top like a crazy amount, but in my head, it's just a hero beat deck that gets to play another really strong quick play spell.
Honestly, I think this is my favorite deck to play of the format. I love it. They've got all the access to every single Miracle Fusion target, and it plays an amazing mix of control and aggressive. You can just set your entire hand, special the Bubble Man, make an Excalibur. You have Excalibur and Blade Armor, which are like some of the best XYZs in the format. Double Detach and then Miracle Fusion for like near game. I actually like it more than pure Hero Beat, but I still don't think it's like an S tier deck. I think it's probably 1.5. I also think some people were playing it weird. Like the one Bubble Beat that topped a YCS was playing, you play your aliases and you just play a lot of like solid control traps. But I think, I personally think it's better than Agents.
Okay.
Just because it's like the best the hero deck ever is. Like in Edison, they're missing so many key pieces. And in this format, they have them all. So I'd put it slightly above Agents. And Shining's just a great card in the format. Shining's hard to out.
Yeah, I think I'm on the similar wavelength. I think it's probably a solid deck, and you know, get the rank 4s, you get the crazy fusions. You can play super poly, you know, take like a Logia or something like that. Take like a big agent monster like Hyperion and make Shining. So there's a lot of different things you can do with the deck. So I think it's pretty flexible and pretty solid overall. So I think 1.5 is good enough.
That is fair. Yeah, so I'm in a weird boat because I think that like there is a hero beat deck or like some hero deck that should be S tier just because like it stat checks a lot of the other S tier decks where just the monsters you're summoning are just good attacks and whatnot, and you have good outs for everything you're playing against, especially later in the format when you can play like multiple compulse, and obviously Shining's really powerful against those decks. I think Spark's really good specifically because Geargias are in the format. So I don't know if it's the best hero deck, but I won't lie to you. I did not see a lot of Bubble Beat when I was playing this format. Most people just played Hero Beat, but I kind of like putting it here close to the top of 1.5. Next we got Chain Burn, the big menace in a lot of formats. I know a lot of people hate playing against Chain Burn. I'm honestly one of the people who doesn't mind it because I feel like as long as you're playing very optimally, like it's you very rarely lose to this deck. I mean, obviously it depends on what deck you're playing, what kind of tools you have. Typically, I'm of the mind that like Chain Burn's always a tier 2 or 3 deck, but I know it's just something a lot of people are terrified to play against. What do you guys think?
I definitely agree with what you're saying. I think Chain Burn probably got that top 8 because it was not really expected. Especially if you're playing wind up or something like that and you build a strong board first. And I imagine most people, like not everybody had access to Shockmaster at the time. Then you get more value out of your just desserts and stuff. And I think it just was an unexpected pick. I think it's probably like 2 unexplored or even 3. I don't think Chain Burn is great. And as you mentioned earlier, Shockmaster's in the format, which can be really rough for the deck. I mean, you can chain to the Shockmaster, but it forces you to use everything.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm kind of similar boat as you, Marcus, whereas like you know how to beat the deck, it's kind of easy to beat it, but again, if the surprise factor's there, then can definitely catch people off guard. So I think it can go 2 or 3.
We will throw it in 2 for now. As the list develops, we can always move stuff around, so I don't mind that. And this unexplored tier, I just wanted to say, it doesn't mean it's better or worse than 2, 3, 1.5, or even S. It's just simply there to show you that we just don't know, basically. What it could be. So next, let's go with Chaos Dragons, freshly nerfed coming into September 2012, but still having a really good showing at a lot of different YCSs, top 32 and beyond. I think this deck's really good, to be honest. Still, I'm a believer it's like close to top 1.5 and maybe even like S tier. I don't know the Bubble Beat deck as much, so I would put it either here or maybe like one of our lower S tier decks. What do you guys think?
I'd put it above Bubble Beat. I think first off, Light Pulsar's stat line is amazing for the format. And just the util it has that, like, if you mill it, you can get it back from hand. It makes you be able to play the full tour guide engine without any real problems, because Night Assailant is great in the deck. You just discard it and add back your REDU, especially your Light Pulsar. So I think it's a very good deck, very good stat lines, very good floating. Most of the decks don't play that much back row removal, so can struggle into the really heavy back row decks, but you do have like 3 Decree in the side. I think it's also a tiny bit underexplored because you can side things like DDV and stuff that people just didn't really play in the format. But I'd say probably top 1.5. I wouldn't say it's as good as like windups or anything.
Okay.
Just because it has its own inconsistency issues where you see a hand of like tons of big extenders and you can't do anything with it.
For sure.
Yeah, S tier 1.5, I think. I mean, the deck is definitely, it wasn't explored very much back then because, you know, Huge Fusion got banned, Red Eyes got limited, Chaos Sorcerer is limited as well, but I mean, still have like a lot of boss monsters you can obviously summon. So I don't think a lot of people played it back then, but just in previous like format library tournaments that I played in, the deck is like really good, and I think it's going to be like a popular deck if this format gets played more. Again, like just big boss monsters are really hard for a lot of decks to deal with, but maybe just like some minor consistency issues can hold it back.
Something I want to mention is it has the best time playing the hand traps out of any deck in the format. Like it can main Maxi and Veiler, and Veiler's useful even when it's like not being used for effect negation. It's useful for a Light Engrave, it's useful for Synchro, and with double Dragon Gores, you have a lot of built-in defense. So I think it's the best deck for running the hand traps in, which is really nice.
For sure. Yeah, no, you're the perfect person to talk about this deck because you literally made a Edison deck kind of revolved around trying to mimic how this deck wants to play. And I think this deck is just really, really good. And I agree with you guys in saying that it's like unexplored with what it can do, because everyone was trying to play the same deck that existed in March 2012 just without the future fusions, and that might not even be like the best way of playing the deck. So move on. We got Dark World. This is one of the decks that in my comments, a lot of people are like, yes, I want to play Dark World. And other people are like, I hate Dark World. Isn't that like a really good deck in this format? What do you guys think? I'm of a belief, at least to start, that I actually think Dark World is an S tier deck, but I think there's so much side hate for it that it can easily fall into like the 1.5, you know, with like Shadow Imprisonings, Imps, Macros, Defissures. There's all these cards that are pretty good versus it.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note. There are 3 Macro and 3 Defissure in the format. A lot of hate, but I mean, Hydro Pump can probably comment on this more because he's a very good Dark World player, but I think this deck is really underexplored. I think the versions that top back then weren't the best, but with how impactful the viruses are, I think that the thing is, like, this deck can main not deck devastation, but can main Eradicator for free, which is really scary for like 90% of the decks in the format.
Right.
Like, you just Eradicator them, you have your Dark World in hand, and you can just summon your Graph again next turn. They've got no traps, and you've got like a 2700 3k beater. I think that's really strong.
Yeah, I can no, just might be some bias, but I feel like the deck could potentially be S tier or maybe like top of 1.5, just because it has a really good time into some of the top tier decks like windups. Like, you have a big boss monster, and windups just have a harder time dealing with big monsters, which is why like some of the 1.5 decks like Chaos Dragons, Agents are there, because they have a tough time dealing with boss monsters. But you also just kind of have like, it's kind of like Vayu and Blackwing of Edis format, where you just get the main deck, like all the hate cards, like the viruses, and you also get Gozen Match Warlords in this format that are like super effective. So, and people hate the deck because you get like the hand rip factor as well, and like drag down to the grave, and get to see what you're holding and all that. So yeah, the deck's super strong. I played it back in the day, and I had like a really big local scene back then, which we would have like 40, 60 people locals every week, and I would just like always top those locals. So I feel like the deck was just like always really strong back then. So I guess I can argue S tier, as long as it works with you guys.
No, I think it's definitely like, the engine is S tier 100%. I think it has the same thing that Windups has, where, as you mentioned, there's a lot of side hate. But I think the engine itself is like undebatably S tier. It's really good.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel as well.
Yeah, I would just say, like, just from like the past couple online tournaments I played in, Chaos Dragons kind of give it a hard time.
I can see that.
And then just like some niche decks, like maybe 6 Sams with like, they just turn 1 Nat BC or something like that. It's like a...
Right. Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of things that put this deck in check. I think a lot of side deck cards. Also, like, the reason I'm not too scared of like DDV or Eradicator is because the deck like strangely has weird consistency issues sometimes, and that's why you're forced to play like all the draw traps or you know, triple reckless, triple upstart, card destruct. Like, it draws a lot of cards, which is great, but the issue is, like, if you don't see the Grapha, you're not resolving an Eradicator. So like, and you either have to have that or Snow to like even get to it, and then you have to get it in grave and put a monster on board. So I don't think you're getting turned 1 like Eradicator very often or anything, even if they play it. And the other thing is, a lot of times back then, people would like either main 1/1 crush card DDV or not main it at all, and that's because you want to play as many cards to allow the deck to function as quickly as possible as you can. That's why you'll see like Recklesses, sometimes you'll see like Dark Smog, stuff like that, because you're just wanting the deck to play rather than playing these high variance, high power cards that don't actually attribute to allowing you to play the game. So
And I think that's the thing that hurts the deck's consistency the most, especially if you look at the second YCS half, just because how much people don't like the deck. They all side 3 Gemini Imps. And if you've got a slightly bricky hand and you try and resolve a Dark World Dealings and they Gemini Imps you just flat neg 1, and then your hand is very bricked. But I still think the engine itself is S tier in the format.
We'll leave it there for now, but let's move on. We got just regular hero beat. This did win a YCS. Guatemala had a couple of different tops throughout the format as well. I think this deck's just like very solid, does exactly what you want it to do. It's one of the better control decks in the format.
Yeah, I mean, it's like consistent, like how it is in any other format is played in. Is this, you know, you play like this, the big beaters, Alias, Thunder Kings, whatnot, and you know, Thunder King's really hard for some decks to deal with in this format. So I think 1.5 is fair for it. Yeah, it's just kind of just does this thing, and it does this thing pretty good. So
yeah, I think honestly, like, I'm partial to Bubble Beat because it's one of my favorite decks of all time. But I think what you said is probably right. It probably is slightly better into a lot of meta options. I think it struggles more into things like Chaos Dragons and Dark Worlds that get the big monsters. But against Windup and stuff, being able to play like the skill drains mained, having all that removal, really, like, both Windup and Geargia hate the skill drain. and then just set a bunch of traps, and having access to Shining, Super Poly, all those cards the deck was missing.
Yeah.
It's just a way better version of Hero Beat in Edison format.
Yeah, I'll just put it right next to Bumblebee because I feel like there's a lot of probably debate which could be better and more testing needs to be done. But yeah, I agree. It's definitely like right there with the top decks. I know when I played in those big tournaments, it was probably the most represented deck, and it would always do pretty well as well. Because yeah, just the stats of your normal summons are strangely good because how small windups are. You're like the only thing in Geargia is Gigant X, which your extra deck monsters are bigger than. Yeah, and I guess a defense position armor is annoying, but if you're playing this version of the deck, you're playing triple Spark, and then also trap cards and whatnot, so you have a lot more outs than other decks to deal with it. All right, let's go next to the Machina Gadget deck. Robbie Cole, big YouTuber, did top with this deck. Some benefits this deck has is now that you have Gigant X, you always have access to the Machina side of your engine, which is huge. Having 2 Dragunity is huge because so many decks play level 4s, and you are always constantly kind of replenishing your hand size. And yeah, I think this deck was solid. I maybe top of tier 2. You can even argue it's also tier 1.5. What do you guys think?
Honestly, this is one of the decks that I'm like partial to. We've been testing the format a ton. I built pretty much every deck at locals, and we've got like 10 people playing at our locals. I think this deck is really underrated. Fortress is a powerhouse, and if this deck starts plussing, it gets out of control so fast. If you can keep one gadget alive, you get the +1, you summon another gadget, get another +1, overlay for a Gigant, get a Machina Fortress, which is another +1. It just spirals out of control, and it's got good utility. It's really random, but Fairy King Elverditch is a good card.
Yeah.
You decks you can play it.
Earth monsters.
So next, anything that isn't Earth by 500. So this is one of the only decks that doesn't care about like attacking into Gores, because you attack into Gores, then you overlay for Elverditch, and you make the Gores smaller than you.
Yep. And then it goes in rivalry in the format as well. It gets
doesn't care about those. As said, it does. I think one of the things that you also see in the format is a lot of people were citing like System Downs and Cyber Dragon. Cyber Dragon's at 3. So if it gets popular, I think it'll be hurt by the side deck. But I definitely think it is actually 1.5. I think it's worse than Geargia, but I think it's like a good deck. I think it's actually solid.
Yeah, no, for sure. What are you thinking, Hydro?
Yeah, 1.5 or 2 for me, or top of 2. And you can always just like side in goes in matches to like stop Cyber Dragon so they can't contact anyways. So that's something that's kind of cool. But yeah, just like if you let the deck get going, it might be hard to stop. That's kind of like how gadgets work. But you know, you did have like a solid rank 4 engine to like make them matter. So I think that's like one thing for the gadgets that it has going for them. And as always, Machina Fortress is just really hard to deal with for a lot of decks, certainly in this format, just because another big boss monster that's just kind of beefy and hard to deal with. So I think it definitely deserves like maybe end of 1.5 or top of 2.
Yeah, I think
I just love Fortress, man. Like
literally
no extra deck cards remove it in this format without making you go -1.
Yep. No,
nothing does.
Pretty sweet. Does Tyrus run over it and then protect itself, right? Or is it
Tyrus does, but you have to make it blind, right? If you have a back row, it's just going to hit a back row.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the other thing I like about the gadget deck is it's Omega resilient against like Valor and Maxi. Like you don't really care if your opponent, like they're going to neg one if they Valor it and you probably have another gadget behind it or something, or you just protect with a trap, summon another level 4, get to Gigant X. And then Maxi's almost useless against this deck. So
you might need something like Soul Taker just to deal with Thunder Kings.
Yep.
Aside from that,
yeah.
T-King's a big issue. You know what? I think actually T-King alone might be enough for me to push
Oh,
this
yeah.
too, because that card kind of solos your deck if it gets on the board before you get going. So we'll put it there
you
for
need
now.
Trag or a Fortress or something.
Right, and even Fortress, they negate the summon and you lost some cards doing it. So
that's fair.
But let's go with pure Geargia next. This deck wasn't super early on, actually. The first YCS, it was played a lot as pure, but it wasn't very good. It didn't have good results. And then after that, we kind of didn't really see many people going with a pure build. And the pure build pretty much just played your Geargia package, triple card D, and just lots of spells and traps. It's not bad. I just think it's strictly worse than like the gadget deck, though. It just lacks a lot of ceiling that's provided when you play the other variants. What do you guys think?
I agree. I think the thing that makes Geargia good is the fact that like the Karakuri version and the Machina version can deal with the big monsters like Chaos Dragons, Dark Worlds, etc. The pure version can't. The rank 4 pool is not good enough to really like deal with anything bigger than 2600. Even if you're getting advantage and you've got consistent stuff, you really need to rely on your traps. And I think the fact that you can search the pieces of your engine with Geargia, if you're playing the Karakuri or the Machina version, makes those just strictly better.
Yeah, and I kind of agree. Like in this, like in the pure sense, like armor is just kind of like a worse gadget, which is kind of funny, just because you have to wait a turn. And again, it kind of suffers from the same thing of Thunder King just kind of like soloing you. I guess you kind of can wall up with the armor, but you're not really going to be searching or doing a whole lot. You're going to have to like 2-for-1 the Thunder King.
Yeah, what's the saying? If you go second with Geargia, you're going fourth? Because you're setting armor. You're
I haven't heard that one, but that sounds pretty accurate.
Yeah, they used to say it all the time back then. But yeah, all right. I know it's just strictly worse than the other list, but I still wouldn't say it's like a tier 3 deck, so I'm going to put it at the end of tier 2.
That's probably fair.
All right, and I guess while we're on the topic, I'll just pull up the other ones. We got Geargia Karakuri. What do we think of this list? I know I'm of the belief that I think this is the S tier Geargia variant, but I know Pudding had made mention earlier he thinks the Machina version's better. I'll give a quick case for why I like this. I just think the ceiling that you get is crazy, and like Windup, by playing the Karakuri cards, you make it so that your deck has like OTK potential out of nowhere. Like if you have a set armor with an accelerator in hand and Birdman in deck, and you have like Heavy Storm or Trap Stun or an MST for their one back, or that following turn you can attempt to go for game, which I like a lot. And then also just the weird synergies of like being able to switch your armor to attack to like get an extra flip. I think that's really good. I know that the armor could only reset itself once because it still recognizes it's the same card in this format, but still, this is the one I believe is S tier. What do you guys think?
I think definitely S tier, top of 1.5. I think it's very good. And as you mentioned, what it has that Geargia Curry doesn't have in the January 2014 ban list is you got 3 Birdman, which is fucking insane in the deck. You just search 1 accelerator and you're like immediate combo off, immediate just bounce your accelerator, make a guy, special the accelerator again. You get 2 level 7s. You can even make Big Eye very easily with it, which is such a good card in the format. And it's like 2 cards for a plus like 4, which is insane.
I think this deck is pretty solid. I don't know if it would have gone 1 or S tier, but you guys feel pretty strongly with that. So I mean, S tier is fine. I wasn't like super familiar with the deck back then, but it is definitely pretty good. I mean, it won a YCS. And something cool, it does play pretty well into like the other like boss monster decks. Like, you have like the agents, Chaos Dragons, Dark World as like big boss monsters. So you got like the Synchro package and the Exceeds package, so you kind of get the best of both worlds. And you kind of deal with Thunder King a little better than the pure Geargia build, so that has that going for it, and you just kind of kill your opponent out of nowhere. So I mean, it has like all the elements to be a good deck. So I think that's probably like a fair case to be S tier.
Yeah, no, I think that being able to stat check other decks is also just really huge. Like, setting an armor in this format is really good because most decks normal summons don't deal with it. I know like one of the best normal summons to out an armor is just like a tour guide, right? But a lot of normal summons, like normal summoning Agent Earth, or normal summoning a like Thunder King, or normal summoning any gadget or hero or Stratos or anything, like those normal summons don't deal with armor on their own. So like that's the big thing with Geargia. I just think Geargia's missing utility or power when on their own, and that's why I really like the Karakuri build. But let's talk about the other build, Geargia Machina. One of the benefits about this is you do get some power in the form of Fortress, which is a really good boss monster, and you up your starter count from 6 to 9, which you can argue is huge. It's not even much of an argument. I do think it's a little bit more consistent than the Geargia Karakuri build, but the trade-off is like you don't have the same explosiveness, and you also can argue that you might have too many normal summons in a build like this, because like you were saying earlier, if I have an MK2 and a Birdman, like that's better than having an MK2 and a gear frame, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think literally the nail on, like you hit the nail on the head there. The reason I like it is because it's a tiny bit more consistent and it's more resilient to maxi, because pretty much everything is inherent. You don't really care if they preemptively drop the maxi on you adding the accelerator, you just set your armor again. Whereas like if they do it on you starting your Karakuri combo, you're gonna have to give them a few draws. But I agree the Karakuri version is way more explosive. I think they're very similar. It's just whether you prefer playing like more controlled or more like explosive and combo-y.
I kind of like the ceiling of the Karakuri build more than the Machina build. So I can kind of see the Machina build being like the top 1 or 2 of 1.5, like maybe behind Chaos Dragons even.
Okay, I was about to ask you. I was like, I think both Pudding and I think it should be S tier, but I do think we should distinguish them. So I was gonna have you be the tiebreaker of which one we put in S and which one we put in 1.5.
No, I think that's a fair appraisal.
They're kind of like neck and neck. It's just kind of like what you prefer, and we would have to see like, I mean, the Karakuri build did win a YCS, but we would have to, like, for going forward, we have to kind of see like how it would do in tournaments just to like compare the two more. So I kind of like, we need more information kind of thing to get a more defined result.
No, I agree with that. And then also the whole reason we have a 1.5 here, guys, is because like that's how close a lot of these decks are to the S tier decks. So that's why we didn't want to distinguish it as like S and then straight to 2, because these decks are really, really close to the S tier decks for the most part. So all right, let's move on next. We did have a Gladiator Beast deck top. I won't lie to you though, I think this deck is not very good in this format, mostly because we have double Bottomless, double Mirror Force, double Torrential, double Warning, like, and this deck's just too reliant on that normal summon resolving and then your battle phase going through. So some of the benefits is that you do have triple Lance in this format, I will say, and triple MST. But yeah, it's just too hard to get this deck going, in my opinion.
I agree. I think if you get lucky and you play like windups, you can punch over everything, but then you need like a trap stun or you need a lance or something to protect you. And GBs struggle with big monsters. There's a lot of decks in this format that'll just put a bunch of big monsters out at once. So I'd say like either 3 or like bottom 2, probably 3 for me.
That's where I think it should go too. But what do you think, Hydra?
Yeah, I can kind of agree with all that. Just, you know, GBs kind of have a rough going after Edison format anyways, just because there's just like so many. It's kind of like caught in the middle again. Like there's like some combo decks and then like some just like beater decks. And
right.
If you could tackle one of the issues, like if the format's just focused on one of those, you can kind of like adjust to it. But if there's like too many strategies to deal with, then it's kind of awkward for GBs. They're kind of like a anti-meta deck in a sense. So they kind of just need a really ideal environment to like be good. So again, I feel like all the decks here are kind of like too different for GBs to take advantage of. So
no,
2
for
or 3
sure.
can be there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think there's probably formats where it is a tier 2 deck, and maybe even pushing 1.5 if it's like the format's set up for it. But with how wide this format is, especially just starting off, since not a lot of people have been playing it, I can't imagine putting it above 3 at the moment. All right, let's hop into the next one. Let's go with this Dragunity Heretic deck. This is a deck that started seeing play, especially on the regional scene mostly, towards the end of 2012. And we did see versions of this deck later on. I think this deck's really good, to be honest. Like, I would not be surprised if someone comes up with a build that ends up being like S tier that I don't know about. However, there's just no results, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend to tell you guys that like I know all the crazy things this deck can do. I just know it has like a 2.5 card combo that can end on Red MD, a Tum, and a rank 6, which is really, really stellar. And the reason I say a half card is because you have to have a card to pitch with the field spell. I think it's technically 3.5 card, but it's any 2 Heretics. So yeah, I'm gonna throw it in on Explorer,
Seals at 3, right?
Seals at 3. I thought it was at 2, but it might be at 3.
At the ban list here, it's at 2.
It's at 2. Okay.
But still,
semi-limited.
Yeah, I'd put it in unexplored, and it's a deck that like I can see as low as 2, but I could also see it randomly being S tier if someone figures it out.
I think I don't have much to comment. I didn't know about that, but that board you're describing sounds really good. Bouncer's a strong card in the format, and just the pressure of like, hey, I'm gonna use red met again if you can't clear my board is pretty damn strong. and a ton.
Yeah, it plays Gator, which can get you to Zephyros and rebounce your Red MD or your field spell, which allow for some really, really cool plays.
Also, the field, like, if you're playing field spells, it's a big advantage in this format because it gives you a better matchup against the Floodgate decks because it's still the one field spell rule. So good against, like, GKs, you can just lay over their Necro Valley and then you can use all your Dragunities, you don't care. Good
Right.
against Dark World because you can get rid of their gates for free for just a +1.
Yeah, I'm kind of like in the same boat you guys are, as underexplored. One thing just like with Dragunities than like Tengu format, for example, that I've played a decent amount is that Thunder King, Maxi, and Baylor are all kind of issues for the deck back then, and those are all kind of like relevant cards still. So I'll be a little hesitant to like place it super high, but maybe the Heretic engine kind of makes it so those aren't affecting it as badly. So
yeah, no, Maxi is always crazy against this deck, even with the erratic stuff. But yeah, I do think it helps some of those problems for sure. All right, next, let's go with I have Grand Soil here, but it's really just Monster Mash decks in general. I know a lot of people tried Monster Mash with Grand Soil in it. I know 1 or 2 Monster Mash decks topped YCSs at this point in time as well. I'm personally never a big fan of Monster Mash decks. I personally see them as like tier 3 typically, because you just don't have the utility, especially post side, that a lot of these other decks do to handle some of the meta. But I also don't know enough about them that I can see myself putting it unexplored. What do you guys think?
I think, yeah, either 3 or maybe unexplored. I know the Gallus FTK is a thing in this format, but I still think that's like really wildly inconsistent. I don't think that's great. And I think I've seen people playing this deck and it's like, okay, it's not great. I think it was one of those things that kind of topped because people didn't know what it did.
Right. Hydro?
Yeah, I can kind of see like Monster Mash being on the same wavelength of like, it's probably like 3, like this, it's kind of like underexplored for me because I didn't really see it a whole lot, but it's kind of similar to like Chaos Dragons in a sense where you're just playing a ton of monsters and you have a ton of boss monsters. And so I can potentially, like, I can see a world where Monster Mash is actually good, but I just don't know a current build right now, so I guess
that's fair. I think since none of us really played it, I'll leave it unexplored. But I will say my bias is to say it's not like, whereas I see the Dragunity Heretic deck as an unexplored deck with a crazy high ceiling of potential, I don't see the same for Monster Mash. Like, maybe if it's optimized, it's like a 1.5 or 2 deck, I think, but we'll put it unexplored for now.
I guess the main problem comparing the two is that Monster Mash is probably a lot slower than what the Dragunity deck would be. So maybe that's what would make it not as good.
For sure, for sure. All right, let's hop into our next one. We got Infernity, which I'm going to give the floor straight to Hydro Pump. You're our Infernity expert in a general sense here. What do you think about the deck?
Yeah, I mean, I played Infernity a lot in past formats like 2011. I played it a ton in 2014 where it was actually really good. In this format is pretty similar to what it is like in 2011, but you get a lot better rank 4 access, and you actually get Void Ogre Dragon, which is kind of like it's like a
crazy
walking
card.
barrier. So I think like the deck's probably solid. You can maybe throw it in like tier 2, just because again, Thunder King, Maxi are just really annoying cards to deal with on a regular basis for the deck. So I can kind of see it being there, but I also didn't play it in this format.
Yeah, it I know it got a YCS top. I think it was at Guatemala, if I'm correct. And I like that it similar to the Karakuri Geargia deck. It's one of the decks that can kind of access some good rank 4s and synchro plays. Triple Call the Haunted, I imagine, probably helps this deck in some ways. Yeah, I can see it being tier 2. Either some version of tier 2 or maybe even unexplored, but we'll leave it here for now. Putting any comments?
No, I think that's fair. I don't know enough to say anything.
Fair. All right, now this is one of my favorite decks. Second or third favorite deck of all time, I'd say, Inzektors. This was the deck that I personally played for all of March 2012, and I tried to make work in September 2012, but I think just because the new ban list, I kind of was testing out a lot of different things at this point in time. This deck's weird because if you ever see Dragonfly or Centipede plus like one of your other pieces, especially early, it feels like an S tier deck. It's just the issue of having only 3 Centipede and the 1 Dragonfly doesn't make it consistent enough for me. I know there's a lot of innovations that can be made in the form of like Foolish Burial, or to, you know, send one of the pieces, Mystic Tomato, to get to Armonite, and then Armonite sends a piece. But my general belief is if you ever have a Inzektor, Dragonfly, or Centipede on your side of the field to start your turn, any turn, it's really hard to lose those games. So cards like Call the Haunted, bring them back, or Threatening Roar to keep them on board are really, really, really good. I personally think it's a tier 1.5, but I will, I'll ask you guys what you guys think as well.
I love Inzektors. As said, if you see your engine, you generally win. When I've been playing the deck, the problem is decks where you, or like times when you don't see your engine. I think maybe playing 3 Armonite with the 3 Call, like Reborn, is good to help see it. But I've had those games where you just like see your Ladybugs and you don't see a Centipede. Because you only really have like 4 big Inzektors, which means your odds of seeing one aren't that high. I think it's got like an amazing ceiling when it pops off, but I think it's just like one of those decks where you need to be having a really good day to top. So I'd put it like top of tier 2.
So I actually played this deck at Nationals 2012, and it was terrible. But I actually think the deck is better here, despite Dragonfly and Hornet getting limited to 1, just because those other decks are like, the other meta decks got nerfed. But I think this deck's actually pretty solid. I would argue 1.5, just because it deals with the boss monsters so well. Like, you just, unlike the other decks like Windups and stuff, or like that can't really deal with boss monsters as well. Like, you just like make like a big rank 5, or you can Hornet pop their boss monsters or any problem. So I feel like if this deck is like optimized, I feel like it could be like actually really one of the meta decks in this format.
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I feel too. And I think one of the big reasons where I'm going to push it, because I was also between 2 and 1.5. I think the reason I'm going to push it here at the end is I just think Inzektors, when they have access to Hornet, just absolutely smash the best decks of the format. Like set armor turn 1, you know what I mean? Especially if your opponent's going second, you're going to find access to that Hornet typically by your second turn, because if you're playing a build that can send stuff to grave via Card Trooper, Armonite, Mystic Tomato, saying in, like, you have a lot of things that can get you to the second piece that you're needing. I'm going to throw it here at the back end of 1.5, but it's also one of those decks that, like you were saying, Hydro, if it is completely optimized and there's some innovation, oh my god, I can't speak right now, innovations with it, then, you know, who knows, like, the sky's the limit. Isn't there like a spell card that like tributes an insect, summons one that's bigger?
Insect Imitation. You could tribute Maxi and special summon Dragonfly or Centipede from deck, or tribute Ladybug, special summon one, and then you've got combo ready.
Yep, and then I know there's like that Clearwater equip spell that people would play to equip to Centipede, and it immediately destroyed itself to trigger Centipede's effect, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean,
Play Smoke Grenade.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say next. Like, even Smoke Grenade might be able to find its way into an optimized list, but we will hold off there and let's move on. All right, Pudding, I'm gonna put you in charge of this one here. We got Madolche.
So you know, obviously this is an S tier deck. This is an S tier deck. There was the one guy who got second place at a 400-person regional. But he also admitted to using Drastic Drop-Off to game jump lost people when they shuffled. He was manning Drastic Drop-Off. So this deck, it literally has Madolche. It has, I think it's the Mewfuel, the cat. It has Butler-esque, and it has the Chevalier. Now, honestly, Madolche is not a bad card, especially with the field spell. Just summoning a Thunder King every turn that adds another Thunder King isn't bad, but it has no real extra pool, like no Tiramisu yet, struggles with bigger monsters. I think this is definitely a tier 3 deck. Yeah. Offering wins you the game, because you just flip Offering, but I think Gadgets does that better, so...
Yeah, Offering's at 1 as well. So.
Yeah, so it's so inconsistent. So this is definitely a tier 3 deck. It's fun, but it's really bad.
Yeah, it's cute, and I will say that I think there might be a world where there's like a Madolche package you can mix into some sort of other deck. But yeah, on its own, I can't imagine it being above tier 3.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no comment.
No comment. That's
comment.
The best comment is no comment. All right, let's hop into the next one here. We got Sea Lancer Frogs. This did have 1 or 2 tops, I believe. throughout the format, and it's just a deck that I feel like from beginning of 2012, maybe even end of 2011, until like even early 2013, you'd always just randomly see here and there. I kind of think it's always a solid deck, but it's never great. I'm either personally thinking like bottom of tier 2 or maybe top of tier 3. Like, it's a good deck. It does things Frog deck wants to do, like getting a Sea Lancer with a bunch of quips is always nice, but what do you guys think?
I think bottom of tier 2 is fair. I think the Frog engine isn't bad. Ronin Totem, and you have both Phoenix and Gotchi, which is pretty nice. And 3 Econ is very strong in the format. Like, if your opponent makes a Lagia, you can just bait it out with an Econ. Or if they make a Dolka against Monarchs, you can take it and then tribute it. But I think it's not above any of the other decks we've mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not really super familiar with. I mean, it's just like a Frog Monarch deck with Sea Lancer, so.
Yep.
But I never really saw like Sea Lancer do its thing ever
So,
in the past.
What it does is it recycles all your Ronin Totem fuel, and then you can also attach your Dupe Frogs onto it, and you get searches when it dies.
So you get the recycled Ronin Totem. Okay, so that's like decent. But again, maybe like tier 2, I can see it fitting there.
Yeah, no, I was like bottom tier 2, top tier 3, and while we're at it, I think I'm gonna just throw this right next to it, just for your normal Frog Monarch decks. It's more or less the same. I slightly prefer the Sea Lancer build, but yeah, what do you guys think?
I know Lithium had a pretty cool build with that. He was the Frog Monarch guy, and I think he topped like Belgian Nationals, and you play like Illusionary Snatcher or whatever. But I think I mentioned this. One of my friends was testing it because he really likes frogs, and being able to play 3 Lad is good into a lot of matchups, and you just need to open Swap plus a Water plus Lad, and it's a first turn Lad. You special the Swap, discard your Water, send a Rodin, banish the frog you discarded, special the Ronin, tribute both, and then when they clear your Lad, you get the Swap again, and you set up a Treeborn Engrave. It's pretty good. But I think that deck has consistency issues, which keep it at tier 2.
Yeah, I'd agree. I feel like the field is pretty diverse for like Frog Monarchs to be like successful consistently. So
Yeah.
No, I agree. All right, let's go into another one here. I'm going to pull up. Let's do Gravekeepers. I think Gravekeepers are actually really good. I think the big scary thing for Gravekeepers is Dark Worlds are in the format, and but yeah, this is like Necro Valley is really strong in this format. It's one of the better printings of Necro Valley at the time, or better rulings for it, as well as like Royal Tribute against a lot of these decks is really good. They have really good stats, especially when Necro's on board. You get to utilize DDV in this deck with Necro Valley. They have Malefic Stardust Dragon, just a lot of good tools that I like. And then also one of the better cards that I've discovered this deck can play that's really neat is Needle Sealing. And it makes it so that like against all these decks that are wanting to put a lot of monsters on board, you don't have to concern yourself with. You're almost never concerned with like Shock Lock if you draw that card. Yeah, I think it's a 1.5 deck. This is my wife's favorite deck, actually. She loves Gravekeepers. And she had pretty good results playing it when we would play at those big 2012 tournaments.
I agree. I think if you look at the top decks, Chaos Dragon, Heroes, Inzektor, Agents, those decks all really do not like Necro Valley. Literally the only decks that don't care too much are Geargia and Dark Worlds, and even Geargia you can't use like the MK2s and stuff. So I think Necro Valley is very strong into the format, and in a format where people summon Thunder King, if you can just summon a 2k guy under Necro Valley, that's really strong.
Definitely.
yeah, I can see a case for Gravekeepers being good. Again, Dark Worlds is a little scary for the deck.
Yeah.
But that might just be like, you might have like have like some serious side deck hate for it, just be like mark it off as like an auto loss, 1 to 2. But I think it does have a case against like the Chaos Dragons and Agents maybe, just because you have to banish the guy from the grave if you don't have to just to summon Hyperion, but it makes it a little harder for them. And so I can see it giving some decks a hard matchup just because of Necro Valley Royal Tribute. Still a thing. Royal Tribute's at 2, and you have plenty of ways to get to it. So
Yeah, and I think the fact that like there's so many good traps in this format just appeals to this deck, because like you're already playing the double Starlight Road, right? In a format where a lot of decks are playing like double Torrential, double Mirror Force. You get to play doubles each of those. You get to play Needle Sealing, Compulse, Fiendish Chain. Like, it's just kind of the way the decks play is pretty solid. Like I said, I think Dark World's really tough, and Geargia can be, but it's weird because like Geargia is also a deck that will eventually like overcommit to the board, and that just plays into all the cards Gravekeepers want to play. And then if you're playing like the slow flip armor search over and over, which is how like I typically have to play against deck, if they ever draw Royal Tribute, you just lose everything. So definitely weird. Let's go to a YCS winning deck here. We have 6 Samurais. What do we think about this deck? I mean, it did win, and to be honest, there's not a whole lot of like terrible matchups for 6 Sams. They're pretty like decent across the board, but I feel like, I don't know, I don't really, I know it's a tier 1.5 deck is like what my head's telling me, but when I play against this deck, I'm never scared of playing against 6 Samurais. I don't know.
I feel like it's really a matchup dependent deck. Like, it's got a good matchup against like heroes and stuff like that, a lot of the back row heavy decks, but if you're playing against Chaos Dragons or Dark Worlds, and they just, like, if Dark Worlds go first and they establish a Grapha, 6 Sams have like as much problems as Dino Rabbit dealing with anything slightly big. So I'd say 1.5.
Yeah,
probably like above Inzektors and maybe above Agents, but around there.
Me being the Dark World guy, back in the day, I was always kind of scared of this deck because I always got sacked by the guy playing 6 Sams. They just turbo out Nat Beast or something, or like turn 1, I was sitting there with a handful of spells and it wouldn't be a good time. But it's kind of like the opposite of Gravekeepers, where like it's has a hard time dealing with like the huge monster decks, but then you can just kind of just beat on like the other stuff that relies really heavy on the spells and traps, and just maybe have smaller monsters like she and like all considered relatively big in this format, so
yeah,
you can even make windups have a hard time sometimes.
I think the only things that the deck struggles with is recovery. If you break their first turn board, they really struggle. But I think the like multiple asceticism builds that came out give you such a consistent first turn Chien and were very strong. And don't forget Gateways at 1 in this format, and if they open Gateway, they just win. Like, they just win.
Yeah, no, for sure. Gateway's still just an absurd card. I agree with that. So next, we got the big scary here. We have Windups, everyone's favorite deck. I swear when I brought up this format, everyone's excited to play Windups and everyone's scared to play against Windups. So let's get into it. Pudding, I will let you go first.
I think it's obviously like one of the best toolbox decks ever. You got access to 3s, 4s, and 5s. 5s are very strong. Not a lot of decks have access to them. It's got insane recovery. You only need something like a single rat. If you've got a rabbit in rotation, summon back your rabbit, activate the rat, special summon something, use rat to banish the rat, overlay for a rank 3, do it again every turn. You just get a free rank 3 every turn. Wind Up Factory plus Wind Up Rabbit is insane. They don't have an MST, it's like a straight up +2. Playing as one friend, I didn't see MST or heavy. He plus like 8 off his Wind Up Factory throughout the game. So I think it's definitely an insane deck. Only things it struggles with are sideboard. It really struggles with monster heavy hands. And it struggles a bit with bigger monsters, but I still think it's the best card for card engine in the format.
Yeah, I think the deck's just like super strong for all those reasons. And you do have like a potential like lockout with Shockmaster. Again, it's not like super consistent, but the option's there for you to like shoot for it if you can go for it. Turn 1, or if like your opponent just doesn't really have anything on field, you can just go for it. Again, I think the reason like a lot of the 1.5 decks are good is just because windups have a hard time dealing with this huge boss monsters, which I think that's what makes this deck or this format really cool. Is this all these big boss monster decks are really good, just because windups have a hard time dealing with them. So that's like one thing. But yeah, this deck's is super strong and it's like super flexible. It's just like one of the best decks of the format. So
yeah, one of the things I noticed about it too is I feel like you don't see bad players doing very well with windups because you have to navigate so many games where you're going like second versus big boss monsters or second into a lot of trap cards, and a lot of people will go for the Shockmaster combo and have no traps behind it, and when they do draw it and stuff like that. So your technical play has to be really, really good when you play windups, and then you'll really reap the benefits of the deck, and you'll feel that it's the best deck. But yeah, I think the deck is awesome. I love the utility. It gets stat checked by basically every deck because all their monsters are tiny. Loses to a lot of side deck cards that keep it in place too. But then it also has some cool cards that it can randomly play, like Messenger of Peace and stuff. So it's pretty cool. But we won't spend
And
too much there.
Thunder King issue as well.
Yep. Let's go with another one of the decks that got nerfed that did pretty well in this format and previous formats. We got Dino Rabbit. So this is a deck that it's like Glad Beast in the sense that if the format's set up for it, it can be really, really good, but it's also just way better than Glads on their own. So I'm either going to put in 1.5 or S, to be honest. I think I have to say 1.5 at the moment. Just, I don't know though. I feel like early on, it's going to seem like an S tier deck when people start to play it, just because the coverage that you have, like the boards you're going for are just kind of good versus everything.
I'd put it in 1.5. I think definitely one of the things that you saw in later formats, like when Mermails came out, is the macro rabbit variation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that has real potential in the format because nothing likes getting macroed really.
Right.
But I think it just has pretty big consistency issues with the 2 rabbit. Like your odds of opening the first turn rabbit are pretty low. You're more likely to see a bunch of vanillas in your hand. So I think it's good, but I wouldn't put it in S tier yet.
Gotcha.
Also really struggles with anything bigger than like 2500 or anything 2500.
Yeah, that's why also it's one of the decks that plays like triple lands as well. And
triple lands,
it's kind of
Soul Taker in some mains.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff too though, because like you play Tour Guide, you play T-King, sometimes you play Guaiba. There's just some cool stuff that the deck can do as well. It's definitely not the same power as the S tier decks or the same consistency, but it's kind of like, I guess it is kind of similar in 6-Ams, where it's like, you don't really have any just like auto lose matchups, it almost feels like.
Yeah. Lagia plus back row can be strong into literally anything, right?
Yeah. What do you think, Hydro?
Yeah, I think it's similar to like what you guys said. It's just like it relies so much on Rabbit, and when Rabbit was at 3, it was like super consistent. But with 2 Rabbit, it's just kind of like your turn 1s aren't as good, and your deck really relies on that Lagia or Dolka setup. So you're just kind of like trying to just find a way to like get like Lagia or Dolka on the field as soon as possible. So that can be hard for that. And then like all the boss monsters, and you can often get like outgrinded by windups, which can be a big issue as well with the deck. Like you're just sitting there with a vanilla, and they're just like factory looping and doing all this crazy stuff. So I can see it being like 1.5. I don't think it's like tier or S tier, but I think it like you can still open like the nuts hand. Like you can go like Rescue Rabbit, Tour Guide, and it just be like March format all over again. But and if the format gets to a point where you can main deck macro, I think that also plays into his favor as well, because that like really gives some of the decks like Chaos Dragons, Dark World a hard time.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, I kind of like this spot the more we talk about it. And then it like has a range of where it can like go up a tier or down a tier, just depending on what's going on in the format. So next, let's bring up, we got Pure Heretics. Parker Robertson did get top 4 at a YCS with this deck. It is a very strong combo deck. It can do some crazy things, has triple Birdman. I think the big downside is Maxi is a god card against this deck. And then like obviously every deck's playing all the good traps, and this deck, like if you don't see a way to clear the traps, can struggle against that as well. I think it's a tier 2 deck personally, but I know some people will argue 1.5. What do you guys think?
I agree, tier 2. It's explosive, but it's incredibly fragile. And it hates, like this format's got so much powerful back row. It hates comboing into the back row. It uses a lot of resources to try and bait things out, and if it gets stopped, it does not have recovery. So I'd say 2.
Yeah, no, the deal with this back row, you can't really play something like Wing Beat like you can in later formats, because Heavy Storm's still in this format, so a lot of decks are main decking or playing Starlight Road for the Heavy Storm, so there's that downside as well.
Yeah, people don't overcommit if they don't have a Starlight or a Judgment, so you're not going to catch people off guard like you do in January 2014, or like Hat,
right,
where people just set everything because they don't expect you to be able to blow up all their back row.
So yeah, I think it fits here at tier 2.
Nice. All right, let's move on then. we got the Plant Synchro deck. This is like the remnants of Tengu Plant. And to be honest, I just don't think it's very good at all. I have it down here. Like, I'm arguing whether or not it's better than this Madolche deck. It did get top cut at YCS, so I guess I'll throw it above it. But it's just missing way too much. Tengu's at 2. You don't have Glow Up Bulb. You don't have Brio. You don't have Trish. Like, yeah, I think this is just kind of where
plants.
You can play plants for you plant lovers, and maybe there's some unexplored tech that you can use with it. But I don't know if there's much to talk about here. What do you guys think?
No, I agree. It's like surprisingly grindy, but it's not very good.
So hang on to the glory days of 2011.
Yeah, just play Tengu format if you want to play plants.
Yeah.
All right. Next, we got X-Sabers, which I like this deck a lot in general. Favorite deck of all time. However, it's also just not very good. It did pretty well on the regional scene. Like I've seen a couple of different deck profiles where it's like top 4 regionals and stuff, but I don't.
It won a 600-person regional.
Yeah. It's definitely a deck that can compete. I think it's better than all the tier 3 decks, but I don't know if it's better than any of the tier 2 decks. I'm either putting it here or here. What do you guys think?
I'd say it's hard to say. They also get Grand Soil, which is somewhat nice utility, but I'd still say 3. Oh, and they have the Invoker, which is like somewhat helpful, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'd say 3. You can play Tour Guide for Invoker and get your engine started.
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely a possibility. I'll put it in 3, but maybe someone figures out a way to make it 2 or 1.5.
I think it's almost like unexplored. Because I think people who did play it back then just played it in the previous ways. They didn't really use Invoker or any of those cards.
For my heart, we'll put it up here. For my heart. All right, let's move on to Worms. This is a deck that got a very, very powerful trap card. And I think this deck is like low-key kind of good. But I don't know if it had any YCS tops or anything. So what do you guys think?
I played it a bit in the time. Obviously, if you see Nebula Meteorite, it can be pretty good. The Worm Yagan / Worm Zex can be good with all the XYZs. Mm-hmm. But I'd probably put it like bottom of tier 2, top of 3 for me. Because they don't have the Reptile Searcher XYZ yet.
Right.
I think that helps the deck a lot. I think
this deck had all the same pieces from 2011 Tengu format as well, and I don't really see it doing a whole lot there. So, and I don't think it got any new pieces to make it any better. So I think it would be like tier 3. Like,
okay. Did they have that trap in 2011?
Yeah, they had Nebula Meteorite.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, maybe it does belong there then. I just remember locally some people would play that deck, and it would randomly be terrifying if they activated that trap card. So
yeah, that card's crazy, but I don't know if there's like anything that like can search it or like mitigate,
probably not consistent enough.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's also like randomly if people playing Dino Rabbit, which I remember was really popular at the time. You make the Lagia, like everyone makes the Lagia, and you attack into a Yagan, and you're pretty sad.
All right, next we got Evoltile. This is a deck that also did kind of well on the regional scene. I know it did well in some other formats. I just didn't see a whole lot about this deck, and to be honest, I'm not the most don't have the best expertise when it comes to it. For me, I would throw it in unexplored, but I don't know the deck. Maybe you guys have better take on it.
So there's a deck profile on YouTube. When I was building the decks, I wanted to try this. Mm-hmm. And I think the guy got 4th or something like that. And playing it, this deck is actually like really solid. It opens first turn Lagia or Dolka incredibly consistently. Westlow is a really good card. It's just a 1900 beater that specials an Evo Soul from your deck when you flip it. And late game, like if you open an Evo Force or something like that and you tribute your Najasho, Westlow is an instant Lagia. Or if you use like a Westlow and you get 2 dinos engraved, a late game Evo Force is a double Lagia or Dolka.
Oh, damn.
And I think its defenses check things. There's also one cool things you can do with like enemy controller. Mm-hmm. Like you can enemy controller, tribute that Najasho thing, special summon the Volcano guy, get another dino so you can make a Lagia or Dolka, and you steal one of their guys so you can make a Shockmaster, you can make a bunch of different things. I think it's not bad.
They randomly make the rank 6 Evil Sword also, right?
No, sadly not. You can make that one in hat format when they have the trap, but you don't have the trap yet. But I think the stat line of Westlow, they also have 3 Rotas, which is really nice.
That's true.
And it's the vanilla dinos are just like the Dino Rabbit vanillas. Like Cerato's 1900. If you special summon it off Westlow, it's 21, so it punches over Thunder King, and then it has a what's it called, a Fuwaiba-like effect. Or if it kills something, you get to add, and it doesn't matter if it dies in the process, you still get the add.
Oh, okay, that's actually pretty good.
So
Would
I
you
think
prefer
that's
two
a
or
very
unexplored?
unexplored. I think probably unexplored. I think the deck actually has legitimate potential. Like I think it actually makes first turn Lagia or Dolka more consistently than Dino Rabbit does.
Wow. Okay. What do you think, Hydro?
Yeah, I mean, it's underexplored for me just because I'm not super familiar. I remember messing with it in one of the formats, but I don't recall which. Maybe it was half format, but I mean, you can probably like make Lagia or Dolka more consistently, but you just probably have to like go all in to making those. Whereas Dino Rabbit's just like it can be like a 1-card Lagia Dolka, whereas this deck might be like a 2 or 3-card Lagia Dolka. I'm not sure.
It's
So
a
you
2-card.
Okay, so
You
definitely
either
like
need the
to it.
Najasho, which you can play. Technically, you can play 6 of it because of the Evo diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also the one from Galactic Overlord, whose effect is to Foolish Barrio an Evil Sore when it's summoned, or if it's flip summoned, it special summons one of the evil tiles from your deck. And that one plus Evo Force, if you play that one, also makes a first turn Lagia. So it's 2 cards, but once you establish that two-card Lagia or Dolka, all your follow-up ones will be a 1-card Lagia or Dolka, which is really nice.
Okay, so it sounds like it has potential, so I'd say underexplored as well.
Sweet, I like it. All right, next we got Karakuri. This is just the like pure combo Karakuri type of deck. I'm not a big fan of this deck personally. I can't imagine ever wanting to play it over like the Geargia Karakuri deck. To be honest, I know that it has some success later on when we get like Solar Windjammer and people are playing like that in Instant Fusion with Karakuri strategies. But yeah, I can't imagine it being higher than 2. I can even see myself putting it in 3. I'll let you guys decide where we're going to throw this one, though.
I think Heretics are just a better like explosive engine. The only advantage that this deck has is it can make Dragunity Beast.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say like top of 3 or bottom of 2.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, whereas I'm not really a fan of decks that is like full sended against Maxi.
Yeah.
And just don't really have anything else to back it up. And then again, Thunder Kings is always a reoccurring issue for a lot of these decks where it's like they want a turbo, but they get stopped by one of those 2 cards. And I mean, Warning's also at 2, so you have to worry about the back row. So
Yeah.
just like a lot of issues.
Warning,
Like
Judgment,
for me,
Torrent.
like
Yeah.
Torrent at 2, Dark Hole in case you do combo and you don't end with protection.
Right.
But like for me, this is literally just the Geargia Karakuri, but worse.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. All right, let's move on to Jeff Jones' famous Psychic deck. Deck is strangely can grind pretty well. It has some really high ceiling plays as well. Think it did benefit from people not knowing how to play against it. To be honest, my gut feeling is to put it somewhere in the middle of tier 2. I do think the deck also has potential though, and maybe even is further unexplored, but my gut tells me it's like in this range.
Yeah, I'd say either somewhere in tier 2 or unexplored. I know Jeff Jones' actual build, like in his deck profile, he's like, I don't like a bunch of the cards I'm playing.
Mm-hmm.
Miracle Synchro Fusions conflict with what I want to do, and like I don't think he liked the reload thing, the trap that shuffles 3 back. So I think there's a lot to do with that deck list, but I still think it's worse than like Chaos Dragons. I do think it is like tier 2 or unexplored though.
I would even say it's underexplored.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. You like look at the cards and you like feel like there's something there, but then like there's just like missing pieces. So it might just be bad, but I mean they get second. But I feel like there's something there with the engine. Like you just have to like kind of piece it all together.
No, that's fair. I agree with that. Let's move on. We do have the Simon He style of agents, Chaos Agents. This was my first regional top was with this deck, believe it or not. I played it in September 2012. The deck I played right after getting off of Inzektors. So I have a soft spot for this deck a little bit. But I will say, I think it's like, personally, I think it's like right here. But I haven't played it since then, so it's probably not fair of me to say that. I just like that you get to play, the Sorks and the BLS while still getting to play all the cool power cards the other deck does, but you're missing it. It's probably a little bit less consistent. You don't get to play like the Trooper engine, or you don't go with like the triple call or anything. So I'm fine putting it down in here in tier 2. What do you think? I'll start with you, Pudding, since you had some comments on the deck.
I think it's good. I think it's maybe slightly worse than Trooper Agents. I think the one benefit the deck has is it literally just plays Treacherous. So like with Chaos Dragons, the 2 to 3 MSTs that most people main in the Heavy Storm are completely dead. But yeah, I like the fact that Trooper Agents just has a lot of chainable shit. Like the fact you can Reborn, or call the Haunted like a Thunder King, a Christia, all these cards. I think that gives it a tiny bit of an edge, but I still think the deck isn't bad.
Fair play.
I'd say probably above at least Hieratics, or like somewhere in 1.5.
Yeah, I would say like at the end of 1.5 maybe. Like I don't think it's like I don't know if it's comparable to these tier 2 decks, just because it did have like some tops back in the day. So I think it could be at the end 1.5 or top of a tier 2.
Yeah,
Like it's not far off from the other agent deck. I don't feel. I mean, Card Troopers is like super strong in the format just because you can take out Thunder Kings, and then you can call the Haunted back for a +1 to MST it. So that's like why I feel like this one might be a little less consistent. But I mean, the crazy boss monsters like Sork and BLS are just still really good. So
just so we can differentiate the two, since we
Yeah.
do believe this one's probably slightly better, I'll put it here at the top of tier 2.
okay, that works.
Next, we got a deck that I think is super underexplored. It might even be one of the better underexplored decks, is Gishki. Didn't see a whole lot of play at this time, but I do remember there being like very short periods of time where Gishki were good, because whenever they did get good, the deck would be insane. So what do you guys think?
I mentioned this earlier. There's a Gishki FTK with 3 1 Day of Peace, and you just make Mind August and you make your opponent draw their whole deck. I think that's actually like fairly consistent. And if they max you, you deck them out. So I feel like that could be one of the scarier decks in the format. I'm definitely going to put that in unexplored.
Yeah, I don't really. This deck's weird because it like on and off has like times where it's like OP and then like it can't do anything. So I don't really know. I'm not really sure where it like lands as far as this format. Like it might have been different like a month after this format starts, just because maybe like it loses to Abyss Dweller or something. I'm not sure, but that card's not out yet, so I just don't really know. I had to look into the deck more for this format, but it's definitely underexplored. Like you don't really see like any old topping list for it, so like obviously it's underexplored.
Right.
I think it's literally people did not know about that FTK until like right before the format changed, and then Konami immediately killed it.
Yeah, I also remember though that like someone in locally, when I would play 2012, played Gishkis, and I just remember him not doing anything knowing about that though. So like maybe it's because of effect failure or the trap. Maybe it's not as good in playing traps as we think. But maybe it just has that first turn FTK, which is like as consistent as like a Shock Lock or something, and then that's enough for people to just absolutely hate the deck.
I mean, they limited the Gust Kraken, but that's the one that rips cards from your hand.
Yeah, the hand.
Yeah. I think how the Mind August thing works is it shuffles 5 cards back in your deck, and what you do is you just Mind August, 1 Day of Peace, draw into another Mind August. You just like loop all your good spells so you can Mind August, and your opponent keeps drawing one off 1 Day of Peace, and your deck stays the same size because you keep just recycling the same 5 cards, and then you kill them like that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if that actually makes leaps or not in this format, but for now, let's move
I hope not.
Yeah, I won't lie to you, my gut tells me it's not as good as we're thinking in our heads, but we'll see. Next we have a Teledad deck. This did top a YCS, but to be honest, I think that it's just not as good as a lot of these other combo decks, and I don't know. I don't think it's very strong, and there's a reason it kind of falls off very quickly after this format. I think it might be like one of the tier 3 type of decks, kind of in the same realm as like the Karakuri deck. What do you guys think?
I think it might be underexplored, just because of like what's happened in Edison with people figuring out you can play Miracle Fusion and stuff in the deck. And I think they have like 3D draw. They have a bunch of consistency engines now. I think it definitely could be something that could be decent, but I think definitely that version that topped is tier 3, and yeah, I think people can maybe fiddle around with it more and maybe see if there's a better version, but
Yeah, just like they kind of nerfed all the good synchros or banned them, so it's kind
they
of
do
hard
get
to,
Void
like,
Ogre though, which is
yeah.
really nice for the deck.
Yeah,
if
but you have to
synchro with,
dump
like,
your hand.
Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like turboing into like the synchro strategies that just like go like all out like turbo. Like I don't think they fit too well in this format. Just because there's a lot of things to stop them. Their combos. So it might be. It's kind of like similar to Karakuri though. It might be a little better because you do have like all the draw stuff. So, but it's like marginal.
Yeah, I think for the sake of this video, I will leave it in tier 3, but I don't mind doing that.
I think that's fair.
And then for our final deck on the tier list, we have Zombies. We did have a Chaos Zombie deck do well at a YCS, making a deep run. They do only play, I think, Goblin Zombies at 1 at this point in time, right?
No, it's at 3, dude. That list is crazy.
He only
it's
plays
44
1?
cards. He's playing.
Okay, well
one Goblin Zombie with 3 Kayas.
I think I want to throw this in unexplored then, because if a list with 1 Goblin Zombie did that well, and with all the different like powerful combo tool type of cards that exist in the format, I feel like this is probably unexplored.
I mean, I think there's a lot of engine that like works well with Goblin Zombie just as a +1. Like Torrentials, Needle Ceilings, all those cards work well with it. But I think losing Brio really hurts the deck.
Oh, that's a good point.
So I think unexplored, but probably like towards tier 3 at the end. Because I don't think they have any way of discarding the Mizuki when they add it.
Gotcha. What are you thinking, Hydro?
Yeah, I just don't think it's as good. Like you can leave it underexplored. I mean, I guess one thing it has going for it has 3 Reaper, which is kind of crazy. Like,
yeah,
I know some decks probably have like a hard time dealing with Reaper, like a Dino Rabbit, maybe even like a Wind Up, because like they don't really.
They have to Papal Operative it to attack, and then just kill it with that. But that's,
so that's not
like going out of the way for it.
I remember Dino Rabbit back in the day having like a hard time dealing with Reaper, and people would have it for that matchup. But yeah, I don't know if it has like a lot of great tools other than that. So.
Yeah.
Hey guys, the audio for the last 2 minutes of the video actually somehow just completely went silent, but I just wanted to say a quick shout out to both Pudding and Hydro Pump for hopping on and doing this with me. I will be linking their channels in the description. Both of them have some awesome content. Both of them love 2012, and we will be making a Discord server for September 2012 format and some big information and tournaments to come for that. But I appreciate you guys tuning in for Tier List, and later, my Meta Pros.